All right, well, good morning, everybody. Great to have you here. My name is Aaron Ford, and I am your Attorney General. I'm joined today by two individuals who will likewise be speaking. To my left is Tillie Torres, a dedicated public school teacher who will have some comments on what we are talking about today. And to my right is my Solicitor General, an instrumental part of the team who works to ensure that we are defending the rights of Nevadans every single day. We are under a little under a month away from the first hearing in the lawsuit that I, along with other attorneys general, filed to stop the Trump administration from illegally dismantling the U.S. Department of Education. I've said it before and I'll say it again. Mr. Trump is the president. He has the right to implement his plans and his policies and his promises and his platform, but he must do so lawfully. And when he does not, we will meet him in court. And yesterday, a federal judge set a hearing on that complaint for April 25th. And at that hearing, we're going to be asking the court to block the administration's mass layoff at the Department of Education, layoffs that would wipe out half of the workforce before this case is even decided. Let me be clear. The president does not have the authority to tear down an entire federal agency just because he doesn't like it. Congress created the Department of Education. It exists to carry out the laws that Congress has passed. And unless Congress says otherwise, it stays. The executive branch cannot bypass the Constitution, and it certainly can't do so at the expense of millions of Americans and Nevada's children. This lawsuit isn't about red tape. It's about real life. And the consequences for Nevada families are devastating if we don't fight back. This lawsuit isn't just about legal precedent. It's about the real consequences for families in the Silver State if we don't fight back. The Department of Education has been a lifeline for our kids, especially those who are struggling financially, who have special needs, who live in the rural communities, or who simply need someone in their corner. In just the last 5 years, Nevada has received nearly $6 billion, billion with a B, in funding from the Department of Education. That includes Pell Grants for over 41,000 Nevada students trying to afford college. Over $38 million for career and technical education, so students can actually graduate ready for good paying jobs. More than $315 million in special education services for nearly 60,000 students with disabilities. $3.5 million for homeless youth education, supporting over 16,000 children. And it's served as a lifeline funding for rural school districts, which serve 1 in every 11 students in Nevada. You take that away, you are not just shrinking government. You are gutting opportunities for students across the state. You're pulling the rug out from under the kids who need help the most. And the truth is this, right now, of those who can, I'm the only officer in Nevada actively fighting back against Trump's illegal dismantling of the Department of Education. That said, I am not standing alone. I'm standing on behalf of every student, every parent, every teacher, and every community that depends on a fair shot. Listen, I was a public math school teacher. I've raised 3 sons and a nephew who went through Nevada's public schools. And I've seen up close what it means when our education system is under-resourced. And I've seen what it means when a kid just has enough to break through. I know because I was actually one of those kids. When I was in high school, I was in a program funded by the Department of Education, the one that Mr. Trump is trying to tear down. That program is called Project Upward Bound. It's part of what they call the National Trio program. It was for folks who were like me, first-generation college students or students who couldn't afford college. And it saved my life. I talk to my colleagues from Project Upward Bound to this day, and we are doctors, we're lawyers, we're servicemen and women, we are chefs, we are educators, we are attorneys general. And if it weren't for that program, I wouldn't be where I am. But I do remember Thomas Edwards, who was the director of the program at the time, coming in at least once a year in the 80s and saying to me, Steve, that the federal government was looking to cut the program. And for the life of me, I couldn't understand why would anybody want to cut a program like Upward Bound that's helping people move to other stations in life. Why would anybody want to get rid of a program that's helping people like me and my classmates move on and become better? And I find myself 40 years later asking that exact same question. Why would anyone want to cut these programs that are helping so many kids? And it's shameful. So yes, I believe the government should be helping. I believe public officials should serve the public. And when someone in power deliberately harms the very people that they swore to protect, well, that, in my mind, is a betrayal of the trust that we were given. That's why I'm suing. Because when our kids' future is on the line, silence is not an option. You don't fix an education system by setting it on fire. And you don't help families by yanking away the tools that they rely upon to build better lives for themselves. Nevada already has one of the lowest rates of per pupil funding of any state in the nation. We need more support, not less. And we certainly can't afford to sit back while the president breaks the law to take money from our kids. My job as Attorney General is simple. It is to fight for justice. And justice means standing up to unlawful and, yes, reckless decisions that make life harder for Nevada families. If the president wants to change how government operates, he must follow the law, period. And if he does not, he will hear from me in court, and I'll win for all of Nevada. And with that, I want to offer the mic to, again, a very dedicated teacher here in Clark County, Ms. Tillie Torres.
Good morning.
Yeah.
I'm here today to talk about the impact of dismantling the Department of Education and what that will do for teachers and their students. I've been a teacher in Nevada for 25 years. I love my work. It's challenging, but every breakthrough, every kid who walks in my door and says, I'm going to college, everything about it, I love. Some days are really hard, but there's a little spark in these kids, something magical. And every kid who smiled at me, moved on, has touched me deeply. These moments remind me why I do what it is that I do. And I want to talk first about Martha. She's in my dual credit English program. Dual credit is a program where students are able to get college credit while still in high school. She started with me as a junior. She's in 101 stretch, which means she does 101 a semester in an entire year. So it's a little slowed down for her. She's not a traditional college-bound student. In fact, she once told me at the age of 16 years old as a junior, I'm never going to college, miss. I don't know why I'm in this class. People like me don't go to college. Just the other day, I have her now as a senior. We're getting it to the end of senior year. She looked me in the eyes and she said, Miss, I can't wait to go to college. You know, I'm going to be a teacher just like you. And she's going to go on and she's going to be a teacher. Martha is a testament to the programs that the Department of Education funds. That feeling of knowing a kid's going on to be a productive member of our society is incredible. I've seen a lot in my 25 years as a teacher here in Nevada. I've learned that there's always a challenge around the corner. And I welcome each advancement in curriculum, each new and better technique, each fresh perspective. But honestly, I've never seen anything like this. When I heard about President Trump's executive order to shut down the Department of Education, my heart just sank. It wasn't some abstract policy change. This was personal. I thought about my students, especially my students with special needs, and I thought, what's going to happen to them? They're telling us that it's about giving back to parents, giving that power back. But from where I'm standing, it looks like they're just taking all of my supports. In Nevada, we have nearly 60,000 students with disabilities and special needs in our schools. From 23 to 25, the Department of Education awarded Nevada an estimated $315 million to support these special students. Without that funding, what happens to my reading specialists, my aides, my speech therapists, my IEP support teams? Who steps in when these federal dollars disappear? As someone who has taught in Title I schools my entire career, I know what these resources mean from the ground. You don't dismantle my support system and call it freedom. You call it what it is, abandonment. I teach juniors and seniors at a school where a large amount of my students come from low-income families. Most of my students benefit directly from these smaller class sizes. We have interventionists in the classroom that offer me and them support. We have class tutors that work individually with students during my class period. We have after-school tutors available at my school that offer these students extra supports after school. We have other students, like our College and Career Center, that helps students find financial aid and enroll in college. Students whose families have never been to college and wouldn't know how to help them otherwise. Services like these are the difference between adequate and excellent. These students don't barely graduate high school. These students thrive because these programs give them the fighting chance that they need. And let's be clear, this isn't just a mistake. This is a mission. Trump's Secretary of Education, Linda McMahon, has openly stated that she wants to shut down the entire department. She's fired half the staff. How do you support students when you fire the very people that are supposed to advocate for them? I'm proud to say that Nevada is standing up to this. I'm especially proud of Attorney General Ford. When he filed suit to stop this executive order, he wasn't just defending a department. He was defending my kids. He was defending my families with children who need a little more care, a little more time, a whole lot of support. He was defending students like my Ailani from last year. She's in college now. She conquered dyslexia to receive A's in her college-level courses, and when she graduated from high school, she had almost an associate's degree. She had special support. She had tutors. She had special occupational therapists, but she did it, and she did it well. She's now attending college, and she's planning a career where she's going to help students just like herself. She's going to overcome all the obstacles that have been given to her, and she's going to help others do the same. Because that's what educating students does. It makes them good citizens that contribute meaningfully, not just to the great state of Nevada, but to our country as a whole. And like A.G. Ford, I believe that education is a promise. And that promise has to include every student, especially those with special needs. The Marthas, the Ailanis, especially those whose parents are counting on us to give them the very best shot at life. We can't let that promise be broken. Not on our watch, not in Nevada.
Thank you so very much for that touching, for lack of a better phrase, testimony. Thank you so much for sharing that. I'm going to bring up now my Solicitor General, Heidi Stern, who can talk about the specifics of the litigation itself, and then we will open for some questions. Heidi.
Thank you. I'm so proud to be here today with the Attorney General and with one of our Nevada public school teachers, truly part of the backbone of our state. The President does not have the authority to usurp the powers of Congress. He violates his presidential duty to take care of obeying and enforcing the statutes of our country when he acts outside of those laws and refuses to follow the laws passed by Congress. Pursuant to federal law, the Secretary of the Department of Education has no authority to conduct mass terminations in the manner that she has, with the goal of dismantling the entire Department of Education. Both the President and the Secretary are subject to the laws of our country, and for that reason, I'm proud to have been part of the effort to file a complaint seeking to stop these unlawful actions. In our complaint, we identified some of the harms that will affect all school children across the country, including in Nevada. Among many harms are the dismantling of the Office of English Language Acquisition, the Student Privacy Policy Office, the Office of Safe and Healthy Schools, the Office of Special Education and Rehabilitative Services, the Homeless Assistance Act, and the Office for Civil Rights. In addition, the Office of Student Federal Aid will be affected. That includes Pell Grants, work study programs, and subsidized loans for students attending higher educational institutions, both vocational and college. It involves $120 billion a year in funds, most of which is sent directly to colleges and universities in our states, including in Nevada. The Department of Education also operates the FAFSA application and awards process, which provides funding for many, probably most, students across our country who are trying to better themselves through achieving a higher education. And because the actions of the President and the Secretary of the Department of Education violate our country's laws, and because they harm Nevada, we filed a motion earlier this week to enjoin these actions and stop harm to Nevada's school children and children across the country. I look forward to prevailing on that motion on April 25th of this month. Thank you.
Thank you, Heidi. Really appreciate your work. Heidi is an instrumental part of this office. My go-to individual for ensuring that we are engaged in multi-state conversations and oftentimes litigation. This was no different. And so thank you so much for the work you've done, Heidi. And I likewise look forward to prevailing, as we have, frankly, in virtually every lawsuit that we filed this year. I will close in the way that I began, which is to say, again, President Trump has the right, as the newly elected president, to implement his plans, promises, platform, you name it. And I have acknowledged that. But he must do so lawfully. And when he does not, if pastors prologue, we will not only meet him in court, we will beat him in court. And with that, we'll open up for a few questions.
But General Ford, the complaint says that the president can unilaterally shut down the Department of Education, and by extension, the Secretary of Education can't terminate sufficient employees so that the Department of Education is unable to carry out the programs that are authorized by Congress. But you wouldn't argue with the fact that if Congress acted to get rid of the Department of Education, that would be perfectly legal.
You know, it's a great question, Steve. And in fact, I was giving a speech to 90 members of students of CSN yesterday up in Carson City. And what I said to them was, Mr. Trump could do a lot of things he wants to do if he were to simply follow the law. And the law would require him going to Congress and asking Congress to dismantle a duly enacted, newly created Department of Education. He won't do that because, by all accounts, he doesn't have the votes in order to be able to get that done, and so he's trying to do this by executive fiat, which is unlawful, and the reason why we will be prevailing in court on this particular issue.
Mr. Attorney General, the Department of Education has been around since the 1980s, as you know, and for years Nevada has ranked poorly in its education system across the country. What is your response to those who say that just like the status quo is working and a change needs to be made?
I don't disagree with the latter point that the status quo isn't working and change needs to be made. That change, in my estimation, is not by dismantling a program that does, in fact, assist us in every which way that we have described at this point. Local control still exists and does exist. For example, we've heard misstatements about the Department of Education setting curriculum standards. That's incorrect. Curriculum standards are not set by the Federal Department of Education. That is something that you can go to their website and you can ascertain that for yourself. We do need to indeed, and this is frankly outside of the purview of what the Attorney General will be talking about in my capacity as Attorney General, but I am a former educator. I've been in classrooms. I know we need better funding for our schools. I know we need more accountability for parents getting involved. I know we need more of our students to be more engaged. I know we need teachers who are paid adequately. I understand that there are dynamics at stake here that need to be addressed, but those dynamics do not encompass dismantling the Department of Education that provides services again to our rural communities, to our homeless students, to our disabled students, to students who come from backgrounds like me that needed a little extra help in order to, by the way, be on the backside of 5 college degrees now, which is not an applause line. This is a testament to Project Upward Bound, a Department of Education funded program that took me from not even being able to afford to go to college to having 5 college degrees, including a PhD, 2 master's degrees, and my law degree. right? And I'm not alone in that in that type of effort. And so I push back on those who would say that dismantling the Department of Education is the way to change the status quo. There are other ways to do that, and I look forward to engaging in conversations around making that happen.
Ms. Torres, I'm curious to hear from you. As a teacher, let's put the legal issues aside for a second. Let's say Congress did say, okay, yeah, we're going to go along with President Trump. They seem to go along with a lot of what he wants to do without much pushback. And they did get rid of the Department of Education. What would that do to your job? I mean, how would that affect you on a day-to-day basis in terms of teaching your students?
So I mentioned before I'm a dual credit teacher, and so what I do is I take 16-year-olds and I teach them college level material, and they're highly successful. And by highly successful, I mean even the graders over at the University of Nevada, Reno look at their work and go, wow, that's good, okay? So I do that with the assistance of two other bodies in most of my classes. I have an inclusionist who is someone who comes in as an interventionist and works specifically with special needs students one-on-one to help them generate ideas, to help them edit their work, whatever is required. And then I have also a special ed facilitator who comes into my room and works with those students as well. So I have that several periods a day, working with my most vulnerable students that have my most special needs. Also at my school, we have something called the MAP, which is a College and Career Readiness Center, completely funded through the Department of Education. And one of the things that they do is they help kids apply for college, help them find funding for college. It's basically two counselors, school counselors, that their sole job is to get these kids ready for college and to hype them up when they do get enrolled and, figured out. I don't know what that would mean for my juniors and seniors if either of these things went away. There is no way I could do the magic that I do in my classroom without my interventionist and my special ed support. It just wouldn't be possible. I have sometimes 33 to 35 students in a class, and I meet with them twice a week, 3 times a week. There is no way each of those students could get the number of minutes necessary from one teacher in order to make what they do possible. So I just don't know what my job would look like, honestly.
Steve, I'm gonna put Heidi on the spot. If you wouldn't mind sharing the story about the special education teacher that
I'd be happy to. I am a Las Vegas native. I know have a lot of old friends here in town. One of the best of my friends is a special education teacher and has been for many years. She works with young preschool aged, kindergarten aged students. And I spoke to her last night. I had just texted her to see how she was doing, and we ended up having quite a conversation about the fear and uncertainty that is prevalent among Nevada's teachers right now, particularly special education. But she did tell me that her entire program, as well as her salary, is paid for by federal government, Department of Education funding. And she didn't quite go this far. I don't think she wants to think about it, but if that funding was cut, if the Department of Education did cease to exist and those funding streams did end, she would certainly be out of a job, but more importantly, her students would be out of opportunity and hope, really. So, thank you.
Thank you, Heidi. A couple other questions, if any?
I have a non-DOE related question. Do you have any response to the CNN story from earlier this week about the trip to the Olympics?
We can have a conversation about that when we're not talking about the DOE stuff.
Okay, no problem.
Any other questions on topic? Yes.
I believe I saw that the Trump administration or somebody associated with him said that some of the, maybe not mandatory, but like the baseline services that the DOE provides might be shifted to other departments or something along those lines. Does that ring a bell for you? And if so, what are your thoughts on how that process might unfold?
Well, it does. And, what I have said is he's cutting not just half of the Department of Education. He's cutting half of almost the entire federal government. So transferring a program to another a department that also has other resources doesn't give me confidence that we will have good services in that arena. I would also note that the day after he issued this directive to terminate more than half of the Department of Education, he also said that it would not affect federal financial aid. But literally, almost virtually, almost literally right when he made that announcement, the federal financial aid form went offline, right? And so I frankly just don't believe that his contentions that things will continue for special education students or for students who receive financial aid is truthful. And I certainly don't believe that even if it is truthful, it's going to remain at the standards that we have at this level, at this juncture.
If I may.
Thank you.
Yes.
Yes, I'd like to respond to that just from a legal perspective, which is that even if that is what President Trump is saying in order to assuage people's concerns, the problem is, again, as we've said multiple times, that he just doesn't have that authority. That's not how our government works, and there's a reason for that. It's because our founders in the Constitution understood that an executive who would take a wrecking ball to things people wanted. Let's say you elect your representatives, they do things that you want, things that will help you. That's the purpose of a government. And our founders knew that, and they knew that if the executive had too much power, there would be the temptation to take over those powers of Congress. And so I just want to, as a lawyer, I'd like to bring us back to that same idea that regardless of Trump's efforts to downplay what's happening here, it is an enormous usurpation of Congress's power, then it is just unlawful.
So as a matter of law, if some of these programs were transferred, say from the Department of Education, Department of Treasury, or another federal department, and the services fell in their quality, that would, in your view, that would violate the law?
If this is a congressionally established agency, so the president just doesn't have the authority to destroy what Congress has enacted. Congress really would need to act. And, I'm sure you know the history, as well as many of us in this room do, of the efforts to cut back the Department of Education. The Reagan example is probably the best. And Congress just did not get on board, and they are representatives of the people. And so in a sense, you could say the people did not get on board with that.
So Congress would have to act to even
Congress
remove these programs.
created the agencies. I'm not sure that I can say specifically as to every single portion of what the Department of Education does, whether Congress would have to act. But just as a general matter, taking something that is a core statutory function of the Department of Education, Congress must take that power in.
Ladies and gentlemen, my
control that.
Solicitor General. She's fantastic.
I'm nerdy is what I am.
Absolutely fantastic. One more question, if any?
What kind of financial loss, if the administration were to go through with what they are considering, and for Nevada, obviously we're going to have an education loss, and so I guess just talk a little bit about the loss that we have with as far as dollars and as far as people.
Well, one of the things that we know is that over the last 5 years, approximately $6 billion of federal funds have come to the aid of Nevada students. So in the first instance, we should try to ascertain in our current financial circumstance how we would make up $6 billion over the next 5 years to support programs. We've talked about the elimination of the Pell Grants, for example, with 41,000 students on average getting about $4,500 per award would be at stake. We're talking about $621 million as it relates to higher education and post-secondary education grant funding. We're talking about the elimination of almost $39 million of funding for career and technical education. We're talking about 60,000 students who are receiving special education funding, support through funding that has come in. $315 million worth of support. We're talking about nearly $3.5 million that goes toward helping educating our homeless children and our youth. And in terms of rural education, at a minimum, we're talking about almost $1.4 million that has come in the last biennium. And so, listen, this is touching every part of our state, from frontier to rural to urban Nevada. And it takes us being willing to fight back against this complete and utter dismantling, unlawful dismantling of the Department of Education in order to preserve and protect the education that our children deserve here. Thanks, everybody. Y'all take care.
Thank you.